and I think that can be done. But it's hard. It requires creativity. It requires effective communications. Part of what's changed in politics is social media and how people are receiving information. It's easier to make negative attacks and simplistic slogans than it is to communicate complex policies. But we'll figure it out. So, ultimately, I remain optimistic about not just America's future, but the direction that the world is going in. And part of what makes me most optimistic is if you look at the attitudes of young people. Across the board, young people are much more comfortable with respecting differences. They are much more comfortable with diversity. They are much less likely to express attitudes that divide us between us and them. They see themselves as part of a global economy that they can navigate successfully. And are showing enormous creativity and entrepreneurship and working with each other across borders. So that's where the future is. But we have to create that bridge to the future. And that means making sure we're paying attention to the wages of workers in countries. And making sure that we're investing in their education and their skills. That we are growing the economy in smart ways and rebuilding our infrastructure and investing in science and development. And that we stay true to those values that helped get us here. And if we do that, I think we're going to be fine. Chancellor Merkel, as interpreted. on the issue first of independence of Germany, after the time of National Socialism. Germany has been given an enormous amount of help, particularly and also from the United States of America. The fact that we were able to enjoy German unification is due first and foremost to the help of the United States of America. And ever since Germany was able to regain its unity, it is in an even stronger position to give its contribution. To upholding this order to which we feel committed, and for which particularly people in the German Democratic Republic stood out there in the streets to keep this up, to maintain this order, particularly also in our country. Now, we're trying to do more than it used to be 26 years ago. And there are a number of other areas where we have to also make a stronger contribution. We will all have to do more in development cooperation. It's important that these disparities in the living conditions cannot be allowed in this digital period to be too marked. Each and every one must be given an opportunity to participate, which is why Germany's fate in many ways depends on the firmness of its alliance with NATO, with the European Union. We cannot stand alone with 80 million people. In this world of today, you cannot, when you just stand on your own. Achieve much even though you may be economically strong. So alliances are part of our destiny as a nation, part of our future as a nation. And this is what guides me in my policy, what guides my government as a whole. Secondly, this wave of populism that seems to engulf us, well, Look at, and it seems, in your words, to come from the United States. Look at the European Parliament. There are a lot of people who are looking for simplistic solutions. Who are sort of preaching policies of, well, very unfriendly policies. We have them here in Europe, too. We have them here in Germany, too. And to take up where the president left off, digitization is, in a way, a disruptive force. A disruptive technological force that brings about deep-seated change, transformation of a society. Look at the history of the printing press when this was invented, what sort of consequences this had. Or industrialization, what sort of consequences that had. Very often it led to enormous transformational processes within individual societies. And it took a while until societies learned how to find the right kind of policies to contain this and to manage and steer this. And I think we live in a period of profound transformation. Very similar to when we had a translation from agricultural societies to industrial societies. Now, when we, for example, see shifts of huge production lines from certain areas to other countries, people tend to ask the question, where's my place in this modern world? We have this here, this tendency in our country. We have it in other countries. Trying to keep a society together. Trying to keep the older and the younger people together. Trying to keep those who live in rural areas together with those who live in cities is one of the most important and most noble tasks. Of politicians these days trying to see to it that each and every one can find his or her place. But those that belong purportedly to certain groups say, we are the people, and not the others. That is something that we cannot allow to happen. That is something that I think, at the time when we had this in the GDR. When the people stood in the street and said, we are the people, that was something that filled me with great joy. But the fact that this people have hijacked it is not something that fills me with great joy. We have to find new ways of addressing people, new ways of getting into contact with people. But I'm optimistic that we'll be able to do so. Now, taking leave from my partner and friend, well, yes. It is hard. If you've worked together with somebody very well, leave taking is very difficult. But we are politicians. We all know that democracy lives off change. So in the United States of America, the Constitution has very clear stipulations on this. It's a tough rule, 8 years and that's it. Out goes the president and a new one comes in. So if it's in the German interest to have good transatlantic relations, well, the task is also to look ahead. But personal, we have freedom of movement in the whole of Germany. So if we want to see each other, well, I'm game. So we're not completely out of this world, as we would say. Mr. Ernest, the next question will come from Margaret Brennan at CBS News. Question, thank you very much, Mr. President. You've spoken a great deal about what you've characterized. as kind of a crude form of nationalism perhaps on the rise. I'm wondering if you would advise some of those protesters at home to stop. Demonstrating against some of the charged rhetoric that has been used by Donald Trump. And I'm wondering, as well, if you've advised your successor to be extra mindful of what you see as some very worrisome trends. Particularly when it comes to making his own potentially powerful staff picks. Lastly, sir, in these final weeks of your presidency, do you believe you have any leverage to stop Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin from continuing to bomb Aleppo? Chancellor Merkel, I'd like to ask you, Bashar al-Assad has described Donald Trump as a natural ally. Your own foreign minister has described Donald Trump as a preacher of hate. I'm wondering, would you tell Americans that they now have a perception problem? President Obama, one of the great things about our democracy is it. Expresses itself in all sorts of ways, and that includes people protesting. I've been the subject of protests during the course of my 8 years. And I suspect that there's not a president in our history that, at some point, hasn't been subject to these protests. So I would not advise people who feel strongly or are concerned about some of the issues that have been raised during the course of the campaign. I wouldn't advise them to be silent. What I would advise, what I advised before the election and what I will continue to advise after the election is that elections matter. Voting matters, organizing matters, being informed on the issues matter. And what I consistently say to young people, I say it in the United States. But I'll say it here in Germany and across Europe: do not take for granted our systems of government and our way of life. I think there is a tendency, because we have lived in an era that has been largely stable and peaceful. At least in advanced countries. Where living standards have generally gone up, there is a tendency, I think, to assume that that's always the case. And it's not. Democracy is hard work. In the United States, if 43% of eligible voters do not vote, then democracy is weakened. If we are not serious about facts and what's true and what's not, and particularly in an age of social media, where so many people are getting their information in sound bites and snippets off their phones, if we can't discriminate between serious arguments and propaganda, then we have problems. If people whether they are conservative or liberal, left or right, are unwilling to compromise and engage in the democratic process, and are taking absolutist views and demonizing opponents, then democracy will break down. And so I think my most important advice is to understand what are the foundations of a healthy democracy. And how we have to engage in citizenship continuously, not just when something upsets us. Not just when there's an election, or when an issue pops up for a few weeks. It's hard work. And the good news is, I think there are a lot of young people, certainly, who were involved in my campaigns, and I think continue to be involved in work. Not just politically, but through nonprofits and other organizations that can carry this hard work of democracy forward.